The man would not stop talking. Riley Castellanos kept her expression neutral as Staff Sergeant Brock Hendricks demonstrated for the third time how to properly grip a handgun, his voice carrying across the outdoor range with absolute certainty. He had no idea that the woman he was lecturing had made shots he could not imagine, in places that did not exist on any map, against targets that would haunt her dreams forever. But Riley said nothing. She just nodded politely and let him talk. The morning sun blazed over the outdoor shooting range in Riverside County, casting long shadows across the firing lanes. Riley had come here seeking the one thing that had eluded her for the past 18 months. Peace, or at least the closest approximation she could find. The familiar weight of a firearm, the discipline of controlled breathing, the singular focus required for each shot. These things used to center her. Now they were all she had left of the person she used to be. Staff Sergeant Hendricks adjusted his stance, his Marine Corps physique evident even in civilian clothes. "You need to understand the fundamentals," he said, his tone patient but condescending. "A lot of women come out here thinking they can just pick up a gun and shoot like in the movies. It does not work that way." Riley noticed 3 distinct errors in his grip. His support thumb was too high. His trigger finger was resting against the frame instead of indexed along the slide. His stance was too square, leaving him vulnerable to recoil management issues. She had seen these mistakes before, usually in boot instructors who taught by rote memorization rather than combat experience. The kind of instructors who had never actually needed to make a shot that mattered. "I appreciate you taking the time," Riley said quietly. Her voice carried the faint rasp of someone who had breathed too much desert sand and cordite smoke. "I am sure I have a lot to learn. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar acts of courage where you are from." Brock smiled, clearly pleased with her deference. "That is the right attitude. See, most people come in here with ego. They think because they play Call of Duty or watch some YouTube videos, they know everything. But shooting is a discipline. It requires respect." "Absolutely," Riley agreed. She had made her first confirmed kill at 870 yards in Helmand Province. The target had been a Taliban commander who had orchestrated the bombing of a girls' school. She had held her breathing for 42 seconds, calculated wind speed and the Coriolis effect, and squeezed the trigger with the same gentle pressure most people use to pet a cat. The man had dropped before the sound ever reached him. "Now watch carefully," Brock continued. He raised the Glock 19, his form textbook perfect for a training manual, but utterly impractical for real-world application. You want to push forward with your strong hand while pulling back with your support hand. Creates isometric tension. See? Riley saw. She also saw that his front sight was slightly misaligned, that his breathing was not synchronized with his trigger press, and that he was anticipating recoil in a way that would pull every shot low and left. But she said nothing. She was not here to teach. She was here to disappear into the simple mechanics of marksmanship, to find 30 minutes of mental silence where the ghosts did not follow. The range safety officer, a weathered man in his 60s with the bearing of someone who had worn a uniform, watched from the covered booth. His name tag read Kowalski. Riley had noticed him observing her when she first arrived, the way she cleared her weapon, the way she handled the firearm with unconscious proficiency. His eyes held recognition, though he had said nothing. Brock fired 3 rounds downrange. The grouping was decent, all within the center mass of the paper target at 15 yards. Nothing special, but competent enough for a peacetime Marine instructor. He turned to Riley with a self-satisfied expression. "See how I control my breathing? That is the key. Breathe in, breathe out, squeeze on the exhale." "Got it," Riley said. She had once held her breath for 98 seconds during a stalk, lying motionless in a spider hole while an enemy patrol passed within 6 feet of her position. The human body could do remarkable things when failure meant death. "Your turn," Brock said, stepping aside with a magnanimous gesture. "Remember, take your time. There's no rush. Shooting is about patience and control." Riley stepped up to the firing line. The weight of the Glock felt familiar in her hands, though it was not her preferred weapon. She had carried a customized 13 Malawian Quachas Mod 7 for most of her operational years, a rifle that knew her breath and heartbeat as intimately as a lover. This handgun was simple by comparison, almost quaint. She adopted the stance Brock had demonstrated, intentionally incorporating his errors. Her grip was slightly too loose, her stance too narrow. She aimed downrange at the target, a standard silhouette at what Brock probably considered a challenging distance. Remember to focus on the front sight, Brock coached from beside her. Let the target blur. Front sight focus. Riley fired 3 rounds in quick succession. They impacted the target in a tight group, all within the thoracic cavity region, but noticeably low and left. Exactly where Brock's technique would naturally place them. Not bad for a beginner, Brock said, his tone approving but patronizing. You're pulling a bit. That is normal. Women tend to have less upper body strength, so the recoil management can be tricky. We will work on that. From the safety booth, Kowalski made a sound that might have been a suppressed laugh. Riley caught his eye for just a moment. The old soldier knew. He had seen the deliberate miss, recognized the skill required to shoot poorly on purpose. I see what you mean, Riley said to Brock. Maybe if I adjust my grip? Exactly, Brock said, warming to his role as instructor. Here, let me show you again. He moved closer, his hands positioning hers on the weapon. His cologne was too strong, his touch too presumptuous. Riley had broken men's wrists for touching her weapons without permission, back when she was Ghost, back when she was someone who mattered. But that was before the final mission, before Kandahar, before she watched her spotter take a round meant for her, before she came home to a country that did not know what to do with women who had killed for it, before she realized that the only peace she would ever find was in pretending to be someone she was not. So she let Brock Hendricks teach her things she had forgotten more about than he would ever know. She nodded at his corrections and thanked him for his patience. And she wondered, not for the first time, if this was what the rest of her life would look like. Invisible, diminished, safe. The morning heat was rising now, causing mirages to dance across the range. Riley's hands were steady, her breathing controlled, her mind cataloging every detail of her surroundings with a hypervigilance that never quite shut off. 3 lanes down, a nervous teenager fired his first shots under his father's supervision. Behind them, a group of off-duty police officers joked and competed. Overhead, a helicopter passed, and Riley's muscles tensed involuntarily before she forced them to relax. You're doing great, Brock said. Really great for someone just starting out. You know, I've been teaching marksmanship for 6 years now. Certified instructor. I can tell when someone has natural talent. Riley smiled politely and wondered what he would say if he knew that her confirmed kill count was higher than his total number of range hours. 20 minutes later, Brock had called over reinforcements. His friend Marcus Webb appeared from the parking lot, another Marine who carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who had never truly been tested. Marcus was leaner than Brock, with sharp features and an observant quality that made him marginally less insufferable. Brock, you are monopolizing the pretty lady, Marcus said with a grin. Trying to impress her with your expert marksmanship? Just helping out someone who actually wants to learn, Brock replied. Unlike some people who think they already know everything. Riley caught the dynamic immediately. Marcus was the sidekick, the enabler who made Brock's ego feel validated. She had seen this pattern in teams before, the alpha who needed constant affirmation and the beta who provided it in exchange for reflected glory. Marcus Webb, he introduced himself, extending a hand. Also a Marine, also way too qualified to be spending my Saturday at a civilian range, but here we are. Riley Castellanos, she said, shaking his hand. Her grip was controlled, professional, neither weak nor aggressive. Just visiting for the day. Brock has been teaching you the fundamentals? Marcus asked, glancing at the target downrange with its low left grouping. He has been very patient, Riley said. 2 lanes over, another shooter had arrived. A young woman, maybe 23, with nervous energy and a brand new pistol still in its case. She fumbled with the unfamiliar mechanisms, her hands shaking slightly as she tried to load the magazine. Within seconds, another man had appeared beside her, uninvited, already explaining what she was doing wrong. Riley watched the woman's shoulders tense, saw the forced smile, recognized the exhaustion of being constantly underestimated. She knew that feeling intimately every day of her SEAL training had been an exercise in proving she deserved to breathe the same air as her teammates. Every mission had required her to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. Even after Ghost became a legend whispered about in special operations circles, even after her kill count exceeded most snipers' entire careers, there were still men who looked at her and saw only a woman who got lucky. The young woman glanced over at Riley, their eyes meeting for a brief moment. A flash of solidarity passed between them, the unspoken understanding of women navigating spaces designed to exclude them. "So what brings you out here?" Marcus asked Riley, leaning against the lane divider with casual authority. "Just want to learn to shoot? Or is there a specific reason?" "I find it peaceful," Riley said. It was not a lie. The range was one of the few places where her military training did not feel like a curse, where the hypervigilance that made normal life exhausting actually served a purpose. "Peaceful?" Brock laughed. "That is a new one. Most women say they want to learn for self-defense. Because they feel unsafe." Riley felt the familiar tightness in her chest, the one that came when she remembered why she really knew about feeling unsafe. The night in Kandahar, the compound, the moment everything went wrong. Her spotter's voice in her ear, telling her to take the shot. The decision she made. The one that saved 12 lives, but cost the one that mattered most. "Just seems like a useful skill," Riley said evenly. "Well, you picked a good instructor," Marcus said, clapping Brock on the shoulder. "This guy can shoot the wings off a fly at 50 yards. Marine Corps expert marksman qualification, multiple years running." Riley had earned her place in DevGru by shooting a grouping the size of a quarter at 1,000 yards and 14-knot winds. She had taken shots that required calculating the Earth's rotation. She had eliminated targets that other snipers said were mathematically impossible. But she smiled and said, "That is impressive." The young woman 2 lanes over was now receiving a full lecture about proper stance from her uninvited instructor, who had positioned himself far too close for comfort. Riley saw her try to step away, saw the man follow, saw the discomfort radiating from her posture. "Excuse me for a moment," Riley said. She walked over to the adjacent lane with calm purpose. The man was mid-sentence, explaining trigger control with his hand actually guiding the woman's when Riley arrived. "Hi," Riley said to the young woman, ignoring the man entirely. "I am Riley. First time shooting?" The woman's face flooded with relief. "Yes," she said quickly. "I am Vanessa. Vanessa Tran. I just bought this, and I have no idea what I am doing." The man frowned, clearly annoyed by the interruption. "I was just helping her," he said. "I appreciate that," Riley said, her tone polite but absolutely final. "But Vanessa and I are going to work through this together. Woman to woman. You understand." The man opened his mouth to protest, caught something in Riley's eyes that made him reconsider, and stepped back. "Sure, whatever," he muttered, walking away. "Thank you," Vanessa breathed. "You just would not leave me alone." "I know the type," Riley said. "Now, let me see what you have got here." She guided Vanessa through the basics with quiet efficiency, her instructions stripped of ego and condescension. She showed rather than told, demonstrated rather than lectured. Within minutes, Vanessa was loading magazines correctly, her confidence visibly growing. "Have you shot before?" Vanessa asked. "You seem like you really know what you're doing." "A little," Riley said. "Just pick things up quickly." From the next lane, Brock had been watching. "You were a natural teacher," he called over. "Ever think about doing this professionally?" Riley thought about the years she had spent teaching close-quarters combat to SEAL candidates. The classes on ballistics and wind reading. The lectures on mental preparation for taking a human life. "I'm happy just helping out," she said. Vanessa took her first shots, the grouping scattered but not terrible for a beginner. She turned to Riley with a genuine smile. "That felt amazing." "You did great," Riley said. "Just remember, shooting is not about power. It is about control." The words came automatically, an echo of something her first instructor had told her 15 years ago. Back when she was just Riley Castellanos from El Paso, a kid with something to prove and nothing to lose. Before the Navy, before the teams, before she became Ghost, before she learned that control was not just about shooting. It was about controlling the memories, the nightmares, the way her hands still shook sometimes when the helicopters flew too low. Marcus wandered over, curious about the new dynamic. Making friends? He asked Riley. Just helping out, Riley repeated. You're good with people, Marcus observed. Patient. Brock could learn something from your teaching style. There was an edge to his comment, something that suggested Marcus was not entirely blind to his friend's flaws. Riley filed that observation away. Marcus Webb was smarter than he pretended to be, which made him potentially more dangerous than Brock's simple arrogance. The morning was heating up now, the temperature climbing past 80 degrees. Sweat gathered at the back of Riley's neck, and for a moment she was back in the desert, the heat like a physical weight, the scope pressed against her eye, her finger on the trigger, waiting, always waiting. You okay? Vanessa asked quietly. You went somewhere else for a second. Riley blinked, forcing herself back to the present. Fine, she said. Just thinking. About what? About how strange it was to be here, in this normal place, doing this normal thing, pretending to be a normal woman, learning a normal skill. About how the gap between who she was and who she pretended to be grew wider every day. About whether she would ever feel like anything other than a weapon that had been put away in storage. Just about the next drill, Riley lied. Brock called over, ready to resume his instruction. All right, Riley, let's work on trigger control now. That is where most beginners really struggle. Riley walked back to her lane, leaving Vanessa with a supportive smile. She picked up the Glock again, feeling its weight, its balance, its simple mechanical honesty. Guns did not lie. Guns did not pretend to be something they were not. Guns were pure function, and right now, Riley envied them that clarity. As Brock began his next lecture, Riley settled into the familiar rhythm of pretending, nodding at the right moments, asking basic questions, being the student he needed her to be, and all the while, she calculated. Distances, wind speed, angles of fire, threat assessments, exit strategies. Because even here, even in this moment of manufactured peace, Riley Castellanos could never quite stop being Ghost. The warrior who had saved dozens of lives and taken over 100 more. The woman who had proven that the deadliest weapon in any arsenal was not the rifle. It was the person holding it. And somewhere deep in her mind, where the memories lived, she wondered what would happen if these men ever learned the truth about the quiet woman they thought they were teaching. Brock had decided it was time for a test. After 40 minutes of instruction, he wanted to see how much his student had absorbed. He set up a fresh target at 25 yards, a distance he clearly considered challenging for a beginner. All right, Riley, he announced with the air of a professor administering a final exam. Let us see what you have learned. I want you to take your time. Remember everything we covered. Grip, stance, sight alignment, trigger control. Show me you have been paying attention. Riley approached the firing line with the Glock, her movements deliberately uncertain. She adjusted her stance twice, as if unsure of the correct positioning. Her grip looked tentative, searching. She raised the weapon, lowered it, raised it again. You're overthinking it, Brock coached. Just like we practiced. Breathe. She fired 5 rounds in slow succession, each one carefully placed to reflect the instruction she had received. The grouping was tighter than her first attempts, showing improvement that would satisfy an instructor's ego, but still flawed in ways that revealed a student still learning. 4 rounds clustered in the upper chest area, 1 strayed to the shoulder. Better, Brock said, examining the target with approval. Much better. See, you are pulling less. Your stance is improving. But watch that breathing. You're still rushing the trigger press a bit. Marcus studied the target more carefully, his eyes narrowing slightly. That is decent consistency for someone who just started today, he said. Most beginners are all over the paper. Riley must be a quick learner, Brock said proudly, as if her improvement reflected his teaching skills rather than her ability. From the safety booth, Kowalski watched the performance with barely concealed amusement. He had seen combat shooters before, had been one himself in Vietnam. He knew the difference between someone learning to shoot and someone pretending not to know how. The way Riley held the weapon during reloading, the unconscious tactical scan she did before approaching the line, the professional clearing procedure she performed without thinking. These were not the movements of a beginner. These were muscle memory carved by thousands of hours of training. A helicopter passed overhead, the distinctive whoop-whoop-whoop of rotor blades cutting through the air. Riley's entire body went rigid. Her breathing stopped. Her hand moved instinctively toward her hip, where a sidearm would have been holstered if she were in uniform. The reaction lasted less than 2 seconds before she forced herself back to stillness. But Marcus caught it. "You okay?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Fine," Riley said quickly. "Just loud." "You military?" Marcus asked, the question direct. "No, really. Just jumpy sometimes." But the damage was done. Marcus was looking at her differently now, reassessing. The way she stood, the way she moved, the confidence that occasionally slipped through her carefully constructed inexperience. Brock, oblivious to the exchange, was already setting up the next drill. "Let's try moving targets," he suggested. "They have a system here. Really test your tracking ability." Before he could continue, Vanessa appeared at Riley's lane, her face lit with excitement. "Riley, I got a bullseye." "Well, almost. Close enough. Thank you so much for your help." "That is great," Riley said, genuinely pleased. "Keep practicing. You should come back next week," Vanessa said. "We could practice together. It is nice having another woman here who actually helps instead of just showing off." "I might do that," Riley said, though she knew she probably would not. Staying in one place too long, forming connections, letting people see patterns in her behavior. These were risks she had learned to avoid. Brock inserted himself into the conversation with practiced ease. "Vanessa, right? I saw you shooting earlier. If you want some professional instruction, I am here most Saturdays." Former Marine Corps marksmanship instructor. Vanessa's smile became polite but distant. "Thank you, but Riley has been really helpful. I think I'm good." The rejection, however gentle, clearly stung Brock's ego. "While the offer stands," he said stiffly. "When you want to move beyond basics, professional instruction makes a difference." After Vanessa walked away, Brock turned to Riley with forced casualness. "You have a good rapport with her. Not everyone can teach effectively. It is a skill." Riley said nothing, sensing the setup. "Which is why I am curious," Brock continued, his tone shifting slightly. "You pick things up remarkably fast for someone with no experience. Your weapon handling, the way you clear and reload, some of your movements are almost professional." Marcus watched this exchange with increased interest, his earlier suspicions clearly deepening. "I watch a lot of videos online," Riley said. "YouTube tutorials. That kind of thing." "Right," Brock said, not quite believing her. "Because I have trained hundreds of people. Actual beginners do not move like you move. They do not have your situational awareness. They do not check their six every 30 seconds. Habit from living in a bad neighborhood," Riley offered. "Where did you live?" Brock pressed. Riley met his eyes steadily. "El Paso," she said, which was true. She just left out the part about the 8 years between El Paso and now, the years spent in places that did not appear on maps, doing things that remained classified. Marcus intervened, his tone lighter. "Brock, you are interrogating the woman. Maybe she is just naturally talented. Does that threaten your instructor credentials?" The comment landed with perfect precision, deflecting Brock's suspicion back onto his ego. He laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Not threatened, just curious. You see someone with natural ability, you wonder about their background. Maybe some people are just good at things," Riley said quietly, without needing to prove it constantly. The words hung in the air, a subtle challenge wrapped in gentle observation. Brock's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. The tension was broken by a commotion near the range entrance. Raised voices, the scrape of boots on gravel. Everyone turned to look. 3 men in their 20s had arrived, their body language aggressive, their clothing deliberately intimidating. The kind of men who use guns to feel powerful rather than skilled. Kowalski moved from the safety booth with the careful authority of someone trained to de-escalate. "Gentlemen," he called out, "this is a private range. Members only. We want to become members," one of them said, his grin sharp and wrong. "How much for a day pass?" "Range is at capacity today," Kowalski replied firmly. "You will need to come back another time and go through the proper application process." The three men exchanged glances, some silent communication passing between them. Then the leader shrugged. "Sure, old man. No problem. We will come back." But they did not leave. They lingered near the entrance, watching, assessing. Riley felt the shift in atmosphere immediately, the familiar tightness in her spine that came from recognizing a threat before it fully materialized. Her training screamed warnings that her conscious mind was still processing. Marcus noticed her tension. "Something wrong?" he asked quietly. Riley looked at the three men, her eyes cataloging details with professional efficiency. Poorly concealed bulges at their waistbands. Prison tattoos visible on forearms. The way they positioned themselves to cover multiple angles. The deliberate eye contact with the most expensive vehicles in the parking lot. "Just a feeling," Riley said. "You get feelings often?" Marcus asked, his tone carefully neutral. "In bad neighborhoods, you learn to trust them," Riley replied. Brock was watching the men, too, his Marine training finally overriding his ego. "Those guys are trouble," he muttered. "Maybe they will just leave," Vanessa said hopefully, though her hand had unconsciously moved to her purse where her new pistol was stored. The three men were talking among themselves now, gesturing toward the range, their voices low but urgent. Riley recognized the pattern. She had seen it in surveillance footage, in pre-mission intelligence briefings, in the moments before violence became inevitable. They were not here to shoot targets. They were here for something else entirely. Kowalski was walking toward them with firm intent when the leader pulled a gun from his waistband, a stolen Glock that he held with the awkward grip of someone who had never received proper training but had used weapons plenty of times before. "Nobody move," he shouted, loud enough to carry across the entire range. "This is a robbery. Everyone stays calm. Everyone goes home safe." The other two men produced weapons as well, spreading out to cover the range with amateur tactics that were nonetheless effective enough for their purpose. Panic rippled through the shooters. Someone dropped their weapon. Someone else cursed. Vanessa grabbed Riley's arm, her eyes wide with fear. And in that moment, everything changed. The careful pretense Riley had maintained all morning, the performance of being someone normal and unthreatening and small, all of it crystallized into absolute clarity. She was not Riley Castellanos, nervous beginner learning to shoot. She was Ghost, Navy SEAL sniper, DevGru operator, a weapon that the United States government had spent millions of dollars training to eliminate threats exactly like this. And these three men had just made a fatal tactical error. They had brought guns to a fight with someone who understood violence at a level they could never comprehend. The range erupted into chaos. Shooters scrambled backward from their lanes, hands raised, weapons abandoned on benches. The teenage boy who had been practicing with his father pressed against the wall, his face pale with terror. The off-duty police officers who had been joking moments earlier were calculating odds and distances, their training warring with the reality of being caught unarmed in a tactical nightmare. "Everyone get to the center," the leader barked, gesturing with his stolen Glock toward the middle of the range. Phones on the ground. Wallets, watches, jewelry. Everything. Now. Riley's mind had already shifted into combat mode. The transition, so automatic it felt like slipping into cold water. Her breathing slowed. Her heart rate dropped. The chaos around her became crystalline data points to be processed and acted upon. 3 hostiles, armed but untrained. Leader at 12 o'clock, approximately 30 feet. Second hostile at 2 o'clock, 25 feet, covering the parking lot exit. Third hostile at 9 o'clock, 18 feet, weapon discipline poor, finger on trigger. "Riley," Vanessa whispered, her voice shaking. "What do we do?" "We comply," Riley said softly, her tone calm enough to be steadying. "Do exactly what they say." But her eyes were moving constantly, cataloging everything. The layout of the range, cover positions, lines of fire, the weapons on the benches, loaded and ready. The distance to each hostile. Wind speed, negligible. Lighting conditions, excellent. Background, clear of bystanders beyond the targets. Brock stepped forward, his Marine training overriding common sense. Look, we do not want any trouble here. Just take what you want and go. Shut up, hero, the leader snarled. You want to be brave? You can be brave and dead. Everyone in the center. Move. The shooters shuffled toward the middle of the range, a terrified cluster of civilians who had come here for recreation and found themselves in a nightmare. Riley moved with them, positioning herself carefully, not at the front where she would draw attention, not at the back where she lacked mobility. Somewhere in the middle, unremarkable, overlooked. Marcus was beside Brock, his hand on his friend's shoulder, keeping him from doing something heroic and stupid. Vanessa stayed close to Riley, her breathing rapid and shallow, on the edge of panic. The second hostile was moving through the group now, collecting valuables with rough efficiency. Phones clattered to the concrete. Wallets hit the ground. A woman's wedding ring. A man's Rolex. You too, sweetheart, he said to Vanessa, gesturing at her purse. Everything. Nice and slow. Vanessa fumbled with her purse, her hands shaking so badly she could barely open it. The new pistol she had purchased that morning was inside, loaded, a fact that suddenly seemed more dangerous than protective. Riley's tactical assessment continued, running in parallel to everything else. The hostiles were getting nervous, the adrenaline high starting to crash into the reality of what they were doing. Nervous people with guns made mistakes. Fatal mistakes. She needed to wait for the right moment, the instant when their attention divided, when their guard dropped by a fraction. Kowalski was near the front of the group, his hands raised, but his eyes were sharp and alert. He glanced at Riley, just a flicker of eye contact, and she saw recognition there. He knew. Somehow, he knew she was not just another terrified civilian. He was waiting to see what she would do. The leader was checking his watch, calculating time. They had maybe 3 minutes before someone called the police, 5 before units arrived. They needed to grab what they could and run. But something about his body language suggested this was not his first robbery. He was too calm, too methodical. Nice haul, the second hostile said, laughing as he stuffed valuables into a backpack. These shooting range types always got money. The third hostile, the youngest and most nervous of the three, was scanning the perimeter. His weapon kept drifting toward people's center mass, fingers still on the trigger. Riley marked him as the most immediate danger. Untrained, frightened, and armed. A lethal combination. Brock was vibrating with barely restrained aggression, every muscle in his body coiled for action. Riley could see him calculating his chances, see the Marine Corps combat training running scenarios in his head. He was going to do something stupid. She could feel it building. Marcus sensed it too. Do not, he whispered urgently. Just do not. But the leader had noticed Brock's posture, recognized the threat of someone with military bearing and barely controlled violence. He moved closer, his weapon rising to chest level. You got a problem, Marine? He asked, the question edged with violence. No problem, Brock said through clenched teeth. Good. Because heroes get dead. You understand me? Heroes get dead. The leader was close now, maybe 8 feet from Riley's position. The second hostile was occupied with collecting the last of the valuables. The third was still scanning the perimeter, his attention divided. This was as good as the moment would get. Riley caught Kowalski's eye again. He gave the smallest nod, barely perceptible. Permission, or recognition, or just acknowledgement that what was about to happen was necessary. She shifted her weight slightly, imperceptible to untrained eyes, but changing her stance from civilian to operator. Her breathing synchronized with her heartbeat, her muscles coiled with practiced efficiency. Every hour of training, every mission, every life-and-death moment of her career compressed into this single instant of absolute clarity. The leader turned his attention to Vanessa, whose purse was still open, her new pistol visible. Well, he said, reaching for the weapon. Little girl bought herself a gun. Goo. His hand was inches from the pistol when Riley moved. But she did not move toward him. Not yet. She moved backward, creating distance, drawing his attention to her motion rather than her position. His eyes tracked her automatically, the natural predator instinct to focus on movement. "Hey, where do you think you're going?" he demanded. "Nowhere," Riley said, her voice still soft, still unthreatening. "Just scared." "You should be scared," he said, stepping toward her. And that was his mistake. He had moved away from the group, isolated himself, created the separation Riley needed. The second hostile was still 20 feet away, sorting through the backpack. The third was looking toward the parking lot, watching for police. The leader raised his weapon toward Riley, trying to intimidate her back into compliance. "You think you were special? You think you could just walk away?" Riley met his eyes with absolute calm. "No," she said quietly. "I think you made a bad choice coming here." The leader laughed, the sound harsh and ugly. Tough talk from a scared little girl learning to shoot. "I'm not learning," Riley said. And then everything happened in the space between heartbeats. Riley's hand shot out with blinding speed, her fingers locking around the leader's wrist in a grip that had been trained to disarm enemies in close-quarters combat. She twisted, using his own momentum against him, and the weapon came free from his grasp with practiced efficiency. The leader's expression shifted from confidence to shock to fear in less than a second. He tried to pull away, but Riley had already moved inside his guard, her elbow striking his temple with surgical precision. Not hard enough to kill, just hard enough to drop him. He hit the ground unconscious before the other two hostiles fully processed what was happening. "What the hell?" the second hostile shouted, his weapon swinging toward Riley. But Riley was already moving, the stolen Glock now in her hands, her stance perfect, her training stripping away 18 months of pretending. She was not Riley the beginner anymore. She was Ghost. She was the sniper who had operated in the world's deadliest environments. She was the weapon that men like these never saw coming. "Everyone get down," Riley commanded, her voice carrying absolute authority that made every civilian drop instantly. Brock and Marcus stared in frozen disbelief as the quiet woman who had been learning to shoot transformed into something they had never expected. And in that moment, Riley Castellanos stopped hiding. The second hostile fired. The round went wide, panic destroying whatever aim he might have possessed. Riley had already moved, her body flowing with the kind of efficiency that came from 10,000 hours of close-quarters battle training. She dropped low, used the concrete shooting bench as cover, and returned fire with two precise shots that hit the hostile's weapon hand and shoulder. Non-lethal, controlled, professional. He screamed and dropped his gun, collapsing to his knees while clutching his wounded arm. Blood spread across his sleeve, but the injury was survivable. Riley had placed those shots exactly where she intended. The third hostile, the young nervous one, froze completely. His weapon was raised, but his hands were shaking so violently the barrel wavered in useless circles. Riley could see him making the calculation, weighing whether dying for a robbery was worth it. "Put it down," Riley said, her voice calm and absolute. "You put it down right now, you walk away from this. You do not, and you will not walk away at all." The young man looked at his unconscious leader, his wounded companion, and the woman who had transformed from helpless victim to lethal operator in the span of 3 seconds. He made the smart choice. The gun clattered to the concrete, and he raised his hands high. "On your knees," Riley commanded. "Hands behind your head. Fingers interlaced." He complied immediately, his face pale with terror and relief. Riley kept the weapon trained on him while her peripheral vision tracked the other two threats. The leader was still unconscious. The wounded hostile was in too much pain to be a danger. Situation secured. The entire engagement had lasted 11 seconds. Kowalski emerged from where he had dropped behind cover, moving with the practiced speed of someone whose combat instincts had never quite faded. He grabbed zip ties from the range safety kit and moved to secure the conscious hostile while Riley maintained overwatch. Brock and Marcus were still frozen in place, their minds trying to reconcile what they had just witnessed with the woman who had been struggling with basic grip technique 30 minutes earlier. What the hell? Brock breathed. What the actual hell? Riley did not answer. She was conducting a tactical sweep, checking sight lines, confirming no additional threats, her training running on autopilot. Only when she was certain the situation was fully controlled did she allow herself to lower the weapon slightly. Vanessa was staring at her with something between awe and disbelief. You moved like, who are you? Riley met her eyes and saw the question there, the confusion, the dawning realization that everything about their interaction had been based on a lie. Someone who wanted to be left alone, Riley said quietly. Kowalski had secured the conscious hostile and was checking the wounded one. He's going to need medical attention, he called out. Shoulder wound is through and through, but he is losing blood. Ambulance is on the way, one of the off-duty cops said, his phone already to his ear. Police response time, maybe 4 minutes. Riley moved to check on the unconscious leader, her movements professional and detached. She cleared his pockets efficiently, finding a wallet with a fake ID, a burner phone, and a folding knife. She set them aside for the police, maintaining chain of custody without thinking about it. You hit him perfectly, Marcus said, having moved closer to observe. Temple strike just hard enough to drop him without causing permanent damage. That is not luck. That is training. Riley said nothing. She was already feeling the familiar emptiness that came after violence, the hollow sensation of having used skills she wished she could forget. Brock was pacing now, his hands running through his hair, his worldview fracturing. You let me teach you. You let me stand there and explain grip and stance and trigger control to you. You let me think you were a beginner. I did not ask for instruction, Riley said evenly. You offered it. I accepted it to avoid attention. By pretending to be incompetent, Brock's voice was rising, anger and humiliation mixing into something volatile. Do you have any idea how stupid you made me look? You made yourself look stupid, Marcus said quietly. She was just being polite. The sound of sirens was growing closer now, multiple units responding to the armed robbery call. Riley set the weapon down on the shooting bench, stepped back from it with her hands visible. Old habits from working with law enforcement in combat zones. Always make it clear you are not a threat when armed authorities arrive. The first police units came through the gate with weapons drawn, shouting commands, securing the scene with professional efficiency. Riley stood still, hands away from her body, letting them do their job. She had been on the other side of this enough times to know the protocol. Officers separated the witnesses, taking initial statements. The wounded hostile was being treated by paramedics, while his companion was loaded into a patrol car. The leader was regaining consciousness, groggy and disoriented, his wrist already in handcuffs. A detective arrived 15 minutes later, a hard-faced woman in her 40s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Detective Sarah Okafor. She introduced herself. I need to speak with whoever engaged the suspects. That would be me, Riley said. Detective Okafor studied Riley with a careful assessment of someone trained to read people. You took down 3 armed suspects. By yourself. Want to tell me how a civilian manages that? Training, Riley said simply. What kind of training? The effective kind. Detective Okafor's expression did not change, but something shifted in her eyes. I'm going to need more than that. Walk me through what happened. Riley recounted the engagement with clinical precision, no emotion, just facts. Movement and timing. Tactical assessment. Response. Outcome. She had given briefings like this dozens of times, though usually to commanding officers rather than local police. When she finished, Detective Okafor was quiet for a long moment. You're military, she said. It was not a question. Was, Riley confirmed. What branch? Navy. What did you do in the Navy? Riley met her eyes steadily. Things I did not talk about. Detective Okafor pulled out her phone, made a call that Riley could not quite hear, then waited. When she spoke again, her voice had changed slightly. I am running your name through our military liaison database. That going to be a problem? No, Riley said, though she knew what was coming. Once they ran her name through the right channels, once they saw the flags on her file, the classified designations, the command authorization requirements, once they understood that Riley Castellanos was not just former military, but former DevGru, former Special Operations, former Ghost. The detective stepped away for the call, her expression growing more intense as she listened to whoever was on the other end. When she returned, her entire demeanor had shifted. She looked at Riley with something close to reverence. "The officer I spoke to said your file is above his clearance level," Detective Okafor said quietly. "He said I should thank you for your service and let you go about your day unless you committed a crime. He also said that if you were involved, I could be confident the right people ended up in handcuffs." Riley said nothing. "So thank you," the detective continued, "for your service and for stopping these men before anyone got hurt." "Just did what needed doing," Riley said. The detective handed her a card. "If you need anything, call me. Anything at all. We take care of our veterans." Riley pocketed the card without looking at it. She had a drawer full of similar cards, similar offers, similar gratitude from people who did not understand that being thanked for killing was its own kind of wound. Brock had been watching this exchange from a distance, his expression unreadable. When the detective walked away, he approached Riley with careful steps, like someone approaching a dangerous animal. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice stripped of arrogance, left with only genuine confusion. "Really?" Riley looked at him. This man who had spent all morning teaching her things she had forgotten more about than he would ever know. This man whose ego had blinded him to the truth. This man who had never faced real violence and probably never would. "Someone who wanted to be left alone," she repeated. "Someone who just wanted a quiet morning at the range. That is all. You're not just some civilian," Brock insisted. The detective practically saluted you. "Your file is classified. You are someone." "Was someone," Riley corrected. "Now, I'm just someone trying to figure out what comes after." "After what?" "After being useful," Riley said quietly. "After being a weapon. After spending 8 years doing things that leave marks you cannot see." The police had cleared the scene by early afternoon, taking statements and evidence, hauling away the 3 would-be robbers who had made the mistake of choosing the wrong target. Most of the shooters had left quickly, eager to escape the aftermath of violence, to return to their safe suburban lives where guns were toys and danger was theoretical. But a small group remained. Kowalski, who had begun cleaning up the range with methodical calm. Marcus and Brock, who seemed unable to leave without answers. Vanessa, who kept looking at Riley like she was trying to solve an impossible equation. And Riley herself, sitting on a bench in the shade, feeling the familiar post-mission exhaustion settle into her bones. Kowalski approached first, carrying 2 bottles of water. He offered one to Riley without speaking, then sat down beside her with the comfortable silence of someone who understood that some things did not require words. "Vietnam," he said finally. 101st Airborne. I did 2 tours as a designated marksman. Never anywhere near your level, but enough to recognize a professional when I see one." Riley accepted the water, grateful for the cold against her throat. "You knew from the beginning. The way you cleared your weapon when you first arrived. The tactical scan you did without thinking. The muscle memory in how you handled the firearm." He shook his head with a slight smile. "You're good at hiding, but not from someone who knows what to look for." "Why did you not say anything?" "Because you came here looking for peace," Kowalski said, "and I figured you had earned the right to find it however you could, even if that meant pretending to be something you are not." Riley was quiet for a moment, watching the heat shimmer off the distant targets. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting me be nobody for a while." Kowalski nodded. "You ever want to really talk to someone who gets it? I'm here most days. No questions. No judgment. Just someone who understands." Before Riley could respond, Brock and Marcus approached, their body language tentative, uncertain. Brock looked different now, stripped of the swagger that had defined him all morning. His face carried the bruised expression of someone whose fundamental understanding of himself had been shattered. "Can we talk?" Brock asked, his voice careful. Kowalski stood, giving Riley a meaningful look before walking away. Riley gestured to the bench, and the 2 Marines sat, maintaining respectful distance. "I owe you an apology," Brock said, the words coming with visible difficulty. "A massive apology. For the condescension. For the assumptions. For treating you like you did not know anything when you clearly know everything. You did not know. Riley said simply. That is not an excuse, Brock insisted. I should not have assumed. I should not have talked down to you. I should not have made it about proving myself instead of actually helping. Marcus spoke up, his tone more measured. We'll look you up. After the detective left, we found some articles. Not much, because most of your service record is classified. But enough. Enough to understand that we were in the presence of someone legendary, and we treated you like a beginner. Riley felt uncomfortable with the word legendary, with the way they were looking at her now. This was why she hid. This was why she pretended. Because the alternative was this, being seen as something more than human, being elevated to a pedestal she had never wanted. I'm not legendary, Riley said firmly. I'm just someone who did a job. A hard job. A necessary job. But just a job. You're a ghost, Marcus said quietly. We found forum posts, military blogs, people talking about the SEAL sniper with the impossible record, the operator who saved an entire platoon in Kandahar, the woman who proved that gender does not matter when you are that good. Riley's jaw tightened at the mention of Kandahar. That was the mission, the one that still woke her at 3 a.m, covered in sweat, hearing her spotter's voice in her ear. The mission where she made the shot that saved 12 lives, but could not save the one that mattered most. Kandahar was not a victory, Riley said, her voice hard. Kandahar was the day I learned that being good at killing does not make you good at saving the people you care about. The silence that followed was heavy with the weight of things that could not be unsaid. Brock and Marcus exchanged glances, clearly understanding they had touched something raw. I am sorry, Brock said. I did not mean to bring up painful memories. Riley stood, needing movement, needing to escape the intensity of their attention. She walked to the firing line, looking downrange at the targets riddled with holes. All those shots, all that practice, all that training. For what? To spend the rest of her life pretending she did not know how to do the thing she was born to do? Why did you let me teach you? Brock asked, having followed her. Why did you not just tell me to back off? Riley turned to face him. Because I wanted to be normal. Just for one morning. I wanted to be Riley, the woman learning to shoot, not Ghost, the legendary sniper. I wanted to exist in a space where my value was not measured by my kill count. But that is not who you are, Marcus said gently. No, Riley agreed. But it is who I want to be. Vanessa had been hanging back, listening to this exchange with wide eyes. Now she stepped forward, her earlier fear replaced by something fiercer. You saved us, she said. Those men were going to hurt people, and you stopped them. You could have stayed hidden, could have let someone else deal with it, but you did not. That matters. Riley met her eyes, seeing the young woman's determination, her refusal to let Riley diminish what had happened. Maybe, Riley conceded. No, maybe, Vanessa insisted. You are a hero, whether you want to be or not. Heroes get other people killed, Riley said, the words sharp and bitter. Heroes make choices that save strangers and doom the people they love. Heroes go home with medals and nightmares and the knowledge that every life they save cost them something they can never get back. The raw pain in her voice silenced everyone. Riley realized she had said too much, revealed too much of the wound she carried. She forced herself to take a breath, to pull back from the edge. I am sorry, she said. This is not your burden to carry. You do not have to carry it alone, Kowalski said, having returned. He stood at a respectful distance, his expression knowing. Whatever happened over there, whatever you lost, you do not have to pretend it did not matter. You do not have to hide from people who want to understand. You cannot understand, Riley said. Unless you have been there, unless you have made those choices, you cannot understand. Try us, Marcus said. We are Marines. We understand sacrifice. We understand loss. Maybe not at your level, but we understand. Riley looked at these people who had somehow, in the span of a few hours, become something other than strangers. Kowalski with his Vietnam shadows. Vanessa with her fierce determination to see Riley as someone worth admiring. Marcus with his genuine desire to understand. And Brock, whose humiliation had somehow transformed into something approaching humility. Kandahar, Riley said finally, the word heavy in her mouth. Final mission. We had intelligence on a high-value target. Taliban commander responsible for dozens of attacks. My spotter and I were in position for 36 hours waiting for the shot. When the target finally appeared, he was not alone. He had hostages, children. She paused, the memory vivid enough to taste. The scope, the calculations, the impossible decision. My spotter said take the shot. Through the target, through the hostage. One shot, 2 lives. Save 12 soldiers who were pinned down versus save 1 child. I took the shot. Through the target's neck, past the child's head. 3 inches of clearance. The target dropped. The child lived. The pinned soldiers extracted safely. That is incredible, Vanessa breathed. Riley's expression was hollow. My spotter was compromised during the extraction. Enemy fire. He did not make it out. The man who talked me through that impossible shot, who had been my eyes and my voice for 3 years, died covering my exit. His name was Daniel Chun. He was 26 years old. He was going to propose to his girlfriend when we got home. The silence was absolute. So yes, Riley continued, I am Ghost. I am the legendary sniper with the impossible record. I am the one who made the shot no one else could make. And every night, I hear Daniel's voice telling me to take that shot. Every night, I wonder if it was worth it. 12 lives for 1. The math says yes. My heart says I murdered my best friend. The weight of Riley's confession hung in the air like smoke. Brock sat down heavily on the bench, his face pale. Marcus had gone very still, his eyes distant, processing the magnitude of what he had just heard. Vanessa had tears running silently down her cheeks, though she made no move to wipe them away. Kowalski was the first to speak. Daniel Chun made a choice, he said quietly. A warrior's choice. He knew the risks. He accepted them. That does not make your pain less real, but it does mean his death was not your fault. He died because I was not fast enough during extraction, Riley said. Because I hesitated for half a second. Because I looked back to confirm the shot instead of moving immediately. You look back because you are human, Kowalski replied. Because you needed to know that child lived. That is not weakness. That is the humanity that makes you different from the people you fight against. Riley wanted to argue, wanted to reject the absolution he was offering, but the words would not come. She had carried this guilt for 18 months, had built her entire post-military life around it, and the idea of setting it down felt impossible. My brother died in Afghanistan, Marcus said suddenly. IED on a patrol route he had cleared 100 times before. I was stateside, training new recruits, teaching them things I had never used in combat. For years, I felt guilty that I was safe while he was in danger. Guilty that I survived when he did not. Guilty that I could not trade places with him. He looked at Riley with understanding in his eyes. It took me a long time to realize that survivor's guilt is just another kind of prison. It keeps you locked in the moment of loss instead of letting you honor their memory by living. Riley absorbed his words, feeling them resonate with something deep inside her that she had been trying to ignore. How did you move forward? She asked. I stopped trying to forget him, Marcus said. I started trying to remember him the way he actually was. Not as a victim, not as a tragedy, but as a Marine who loved his job and died doing something that mattered to him. I carry him with me, but I do not let him chain me to the past. Vanessa stepped forward, her voice still thick with emotion. My father was a Marine, she said. He did 3 tours in Iraq. When he came home, he was not the same person. The things he saw, the things he did, they ate away at him until there was nothing left but the ghost of who he used to be. He killed himself when I was 16. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. I came to the range today because I wanted to understand the world that took him from me. I wanted to hold the weight of the thing that defined his life. And then I met you, and I saw someone who carries the same shadows he carried. But you're still fighting. You are still here. That matters more than you know. Riley felt something break inside her chest, some carefully constructed wall crumbling under the weight of shared pain. I am sorry about your father, she said. And I am sorry about Daniel, Vanessa replied. But he would not want you to stop living because he stopped breathing. My father would not have wanted that for me, and Daniel would not want it for you. Brock had been silent through all of this, his earlier arrogance completely stripped away. Now he spoke, his voice rough with emotion. I have never seen combat, he said. I have spent 6 years teaching marksmanship to Marines who deploy while I stay safe on base. I tell myself I am serving, that training is important, but the truth is I'm terrified of actually having to use these skills in a real situation. He looked at Riley with something close to shame. When those men pulled guns today, I froze. I have all this training, all this talk about being ready, and when it mattered, I did nothing. You saved us. You, the person I was condescending to all morning. You were the only one brave enough to act. Bravery had nothing to do with it, Riley said. I acted because my training overrode my fear, because I have done it so many times that my body moved before my mind could stop it. That is not courage. That is conditioning. You are wrong, Kowalski said firmly. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting despite the fear. You could have hidden. You could have let someone else take the risk. But you chose to put yourself in danger to protect strangers. That is the definition of courage. Riley wanted to argue, but she was tired. Tired of carrying the weight alone. Tired of pretending. Tired of running from the truth of who she was and what she had done. I do not know how to be anything other than Ghost, she admitted quietly. For 8 years, that was my identity. My purpose. The thing that gave my life meaning. And now I am supposed to just be Riley, regular person, as if I could forget everything I learned, everything I became. I do not know how to do that. Maybe you are not supposed to forget, Marcus suggested. Maybe you're supposed to integrate, to be Riley who is Ghost, to honor both parts of yourself instead of choosing one over the other. The military does not prepare you for after, Riley said bitterly. They train you to be a weapon, and then they hand you discharge papers and expect you to figure out how to be human again. They do not tell you that your skills become liabilities, that your reflexes become problems, that the things that kept you alive over there make you strange over here. So find a middle ground, Kowalski said. Use your skills in ways that help instead of harm. Train others. Consult. Share your knowledge with people who can benefit from it. You do not have to stop being who you are. You just have to find a new way to be her. Riley looked at the old veteran, seeing decades of hard-won wisdom in his weathered face. Did you find that middle ground? Eventually, he said. Took me years and a lot of mistakes. But yes, this range became my middle ground. Teaching safety. Helping people learn to protect themselves. Staying connected to the discipline without the killing. It is not perfect, but it is something. I could help, Brock offered hesitantly. If you wanted to teach here, I could learn from you. Real instruction, not the theoretical garbage I have been spouting. You could show me what actual combat shooting looks like. Riley studied him, seeing genuine humility where arrogance used to be. The morning's events had changed him, forced him to confront the gap between his self-image and his reality. That kind of growth was painful but necessary. Maybe, Riley said, I would have to think about it. I am enlisting, Vanessa announced suddenly, the declaration firm and resolute. I came here today, just wanted to understand my father's world, but now I know I need to be part of it. I want to serve. I want to matter the way you mattered. Riley's first instinct was to warn her away, to tell her about the cost and the scars and the way service changed you in ways you could never anticipate. But looking at Vanessa's determined face, she recognized something of her younger self, the girl from El Paso who had joined the Navy with dreams of making a difference. If you are serious, Riley said carefully, then do it right. Do not enlist to prove something or to honor someone. Enlist because you genuinely want to serve. And if you do, work harder than everyone around you. Be better, be smarter, and never, ever let anyone tell you that you do not belong. Will you help me prepare? Vanessa asked. Riley hesitated, feeling the pull of connection, of purpose, of being needed in a way that did not require killing. Yes, she said finally. I will help you. The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the range. The day had started with Riley hiding, pretending, running from herself. It was ending with her exposed, vulnerable, and somehow lighter for it. The guilt was still there, the memories of Daniel still sharp and cutting, but they felt slightly less suffocating. Thank you, Riley said to the group, for listening, for understanding, for not running away when you learned who I really am. You gave us the truth, Kowalski said. The least we could do is honor it. Brock stood, extending his hand formally. I would be honored to learn from you, he said, if you will have me as a student. A real student this time. Riley shook his hand, feeling the strange reversal of their morning dynamic. Just promise me one thing, she said. Anything. Stop teaching people the way you were teaching me. Actual beginners need patience and encouragement, not lectures about how women cannot handle recoil. Brock's face flushed with embarrassment. Deal, he said. I have a lot to unlearn. We all do, Marcus added. That is what growth looks like. As the group began to disperse, gathering their belongings and preparing to leave, Riley felt something shift inside her. Not healing, exactly. Not absolution. But perhaps the first small step toward accepting that she could be both Ghost and Riley. That her past did not have to define her future. That the skills she had learned in service of death might find new purpose in service of life. Daniel, she thought silently, looking up at the darkening sky. I'm going to try. I'm going to try to live enough for both of us. I hope that is okay. 3 days after the robbery, Riley's phone rang with an unknown number. She almost did not answer, but something made her pick up on the fourth ring. Riley Castellanos? A male voice asked, professional and clipped. Speaking. This is Captain James Reardon, United States Marine Corps. I am the commanding officer at Camp Pendleton's Advanced Marksmanship Unit. I received a very interesting call from Staff Sergeant Brock Hendricks. Riley closed her eyes, already knowing where this was going. Sir, if this is about the incident at the range, I was just defending civilians. I have no interest in publicity or recognition. That is not why I am calling, Captain Reardon said. Hendricks told me about your background. He suggested that the Marine Corps would benefit from your expertise. We are developing a new training program for our designated marksman course, and we need someone with real-world experience to consult. I am retired, Riley said firmly. I understand that. This would not be active duty. This would be contract work, teaching, sharing knowledge, helping us prepare the next generation of Marine snipers to face the threats you faced. Riley felt the familiar resistance rising. I'm trying to move away from that life, not deeper into it. With respect, the captain said, moving away from it has not been working for you, has it? Hendricks mentioned that you have been struggling to find your place. Maybe that is because you are trying to be someone you are not instead of being who you are in a different context. The words hit harder than Riley wanted to admit. She had spent 18 months pretending, hiding, trying to be normal, and all it had brought her was isolation and emptiness. I need to think about it, Riley said. Fair enough. But consider this. Right now, we have instructors who have never faced combat teaching Marines who will. We have people with classroom knowledge, but no battlefield wisdom. You could change that. You could give these Marines the edge that keeps them alive. Is that not worth considering? After the call ended, Riley sat in her apartment staring at the blank wall. The place was sparse, impersonal, temporary. She had been living here for 8 months, but had not bothered to decorate. No photographs, no mementos, nothing that would make it feel like home, because admitting this was home meant admitting the war was really over. Her phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. Got my ASFOB study materials. When can we start prep sessions? Riley stared at the message. Vanessa was serious about enlisting. She would go through with it, with or without Riley's help. But with Riley's help, she would be better prepared. She would have advantages other recruits would not. She would have a chance. Another text came through, this one from Marcus. Brock told me about the Marine Corps offer. For what it is worth, I think you should do it. You are too good at what you do to waste it pretending to be average. Riley got up and walked to her closet. In the back, buried under civilian clothes she rarely wore, was a footlocker. She had not opened it since moving in. Inside were the pieces of her former life. Her dress blues, her medals, photographs from deployment, and wrapped carefully in a tactical case, her custom 13 Malawian Quachas rifle. She lifted the rifle out, feeling its familiar weight, the perfect balance she had spent years achieving through custom modifications. This weapon knew her breath, her heartbeat, her soul. It had been an extension of her body for so long that holding it now felt like greeting an old friend. The phone rang again. This time it was Brock. Did the captain call you? He asked without preamble. He did. And? And I'm thinking about it. Riley, Brock said, his tone earnest. I know I messed up when we first met. I know I was arrogant and condescending and stupid. But spending the last 3 days thinking about what you did, about who you are, I realized something. You are wasting your gift by hiding it. The world needs people like you. The Marines need people like you. I killed people, Brock. Over 100 confirmed kills. That is not a gift. That is a curse I learned to live with. You protected people, Brock countered. You saved lives by taking others. That is not murder. That is warfare. And the skills you developed, the knowledge you gained, that could save the lives of Marines who are deploying right now. Does that not matter? Riley sat down, the rifle across her lap. Of course it matters. But teaching means confronting everything I have been trying to forget. Maybe forgetting is not the answer, Brock said quietly. Maybe remembering is. Maybe honoring what you learned by passing it on is how you heal. After the call, Riley made a decision. She pulled out her laptop and began writing an email to Captain Reardon. She would consult. She would teach. But on her terms. No active duty. No deployments. Just knowledge transfer. Just helping prepare the next generation. As she typed, she felt something shift. Not peace exactly, but purpose, direction, a path forward that did not require her to pretend she had never been Ghost. 2 days later, Riley stood at the entrance to Camp Pendleton, her credentials checked, her clearance verified. Captain Reardon met her personally, a tall man in his 40s with the bearing of someone who had seen combat and earned every piece of rank on his collar. Ms. Castellanos, he said, shaking her hand firmly. Thank you for coming. I know this was not an easy decision. It was not, Riley agreed. But it was necessary. He walked her through the base, explaining the program they were developing. Advanced marksmanship for designated marksmen. Urban combat scenarios. Long-range precision under stress. Everything Riley had lived and breathed for 8 years. We have good instructors, the captain said, but they lack the one thing we cannot teach in a classroom. The experience of making impossible shots in impossible conditions. The mental discipline required to take a life to save lives. You have that experience. They reached the range, a facility far more advanced than the civilian range where Riley had spent her Saturday. Multiple shooting positions, variable distance targets, wind simulation, everything designed to replicate combat conditions. A group of Marines was already assembled, 12 men and 2 women, all staff sergeants and gunnery sergeants selected for the advanced training. They watched Riley with curiosity and skepticism. She was civilian dressed, female, and looked more like someone's sister than a legendary operator. This is Riley Castellanos, Captain Reardon announced. Former Navy SEAL, DevGru operator, call sign Ghost. She holds the record for longest confirmed kill in modern naval special operations history. She will be consulting on this program for the next 6 weeks. The skepticism did not entirely fade, but it was joined by respect and curiosity. One of the female Marines, a gunnery sergeant with intense eyes, stepped forward. Gunny Patricia Wolf, she said, I have heard stories about Ghost. Did not know Ghost was a woman. Most people did not, Riley said. That was intentional. Can you prove you are who they say you are? One of the male Marines asked, his tone challenging but not disrespectful. Riley looked at Captain Reardon, who nodded permission. She walked to the armory window and requested a standard-issue M40A6 sniper rifle. The armorer handed it over with raised eyebrows. She checked the weapon, loaded a magazine, and walked to a shooting position. How far are the targets? She asked. Variable, the captain said. Closest is 100 yards. Farthest is 800. Wind speed, 12 knots, gusting to 15. Left to right. Riley settled into position, her body remembering the stance, the breathing, the absolute focus. The Marines watched in silence as she acquired the 800-yard target, made minute adjustments for wind and elevation, controlled her breathing, and squeezed the trigger. The shot echoed across the range. 800 yards away, the target registered a perfect center mass hit. Without pausing, Riley cycled the bolt and fired again. Another hit, then another. 5 shots, 5 perfect hits, at maximum range, in challenging wind conditions. She stood, cleared the weapon, and returned it to the armory. The Marines were silent. Their skepticism completely evaporated. "Any other questions?" Riley asked. Gunny Wolf smiled. "Just one. Where do we start?" "Now," Riley said. "And fair warning, I'm going to push you harder than you have ever been pushed. I'm going to make you question everything you think you know. I'm going to break down your technique and rebuild it from scratch. Because out there, in the real world, perfect is barely good enough, and good enough gets people killed." The Marines nodded, understanding that they were in the presence of someone who had earned every word she spoke with blood and sacrifice. Captain Reardon pulled Riley aside as the Marines began setting up. "You did not have to prove yourself to them," he said quietly. "Yes, I did," Riley replied. "Respect is earned, not demanded. They needed to see that I can do what I claim I can do. Now they will listen when I teach." "Fair point," the captain conceded. "Welcome back to service, Ms. Castellanos, even if it is just temporary." 3 weeks into the training program, Riley had transformed the Marine marksman into something sharper, deadlier, more precise. She pushed them through scenarios that replicated the chaos and pressure of real combat. She taught them not just to shoot, but to think like prey and predator simultaneously, to calculate wind and distance while under simulated fire, to make impossible shots seem routine. Gunny Wolf had become Riley's informal second-in-command, the Marine who best understood what Riley was teaching and could translate it for the others. She was skilled, dedicated, and reminded Riley painfully of herself at that age. All potential and determination, not yet touched by the reality of taking a human life. On this particular afternoon, Riley had set up a complex scenario. Multiple targets at varying distances. Hostage situations requiring surgical precision. Time pressure. Wind gusts. Everything designed to push the Marines to their limits. "Staff Sergeant Chun," Riley called out, and felt the familiar stab of pain at the name. This Chun was no relation to Daniel, but hearing it still hurt. "You have 30 seconds to acquire and eliminate 3 targets. 2 are holding hostages. Rules of engagement require no collateral damage. Begin." Chun moved into position, his breathing controlled, his movements efficient. He had improved dramatically over 3 weeks, but Riley could see the hesitation, the fraction of a second where doubt crept in. He took the first shot. Clean hit, but it had taken him 12 seconds. "Too slow. Time is a luxury you will not have in the field," Riley said firmly. 12 seconds is an eternity. 12 seconds is long enough for the enemy to execute the hostage, reposition, or put a round in you. Faster. Chun took the second shot at 18 seconds. Another hit, but the pressure was affecting his accuracy. The round was off-center by 3 inches. In training, acceptable. In combat, potentially fatal. "You are thinking too much," Riley said. "Your body knows what to do. Trust your training. Let the calculations happen in your subconscious." Conscious thought is the enemy of instinct. The third shot came at 28 seconds. Clean hit. Chun stood, frustration evident in his posture. "Better," Riley acknowledged. "But better is not good enough when lives depend on you." Again, from the beginning. As Chun reset, Gunny Wolf approached Riley quietly. "Permission to speak freely," she said. "Granted. You're pushing them hard. Harder than any instructor I have trained under. Some of them are starting to break." Riley watched the Marines, seeing the exhaustion, the self-doubt, the frustration. "Good," she said. "I need to see who breaks under pressure now, in training, rather than discovering it when bullets are real. Better they quit here than fail in combat." "You think some will quit?" "I think some should quit. Not everyone is built for this level of precision under stress." "That is not a judgment. It is just reality. Were you ever tempted to quit?" Wolf asked. "Every single day," Riley admitted. "Especially in SEAL training. Especially during Hell Week, when everything in my body screamed to ring the bell and make the pain stop. But I had something stronger than the desire to quit." "What?" "Something to prove. To myself, and to everyone who said I did not belong." She looked at Wolf directly. "You have that same drive. I see it. But drive alone is not enough. You need to be honest with yourself about whether you can do what this job requires. Can you look through a scope at a human being and pull the trigger knowing that person will cease to exist because of your choice? Wolf was quiet for a long moment. I do not know, she admitted. I want to believe I can, but I have never been tested. Honesty is good, Riley said. Hold on to that. The ones who claim they know for certain are usually the ones who break when reality hits. The training continued through the afternoon. Riley rotated through each Marine, identifying weaknesses, correcting form, pushing boundaries. She was relentless but fair, demanding but respectful. The Marines responded with the kind of dedication that came from recognizing they were being trained by someone who had done what they aspired to do. As the sun began to set, Captain Reardon appeared at the range with an unexpected visitor. Brock Hendricks, in civilian clothes, looking uncertain and out of place. Staff Sergeant Hendricks asked permission to observe, the captain said. I approved it. Hope that is acceptable. Riley studied Brock, seeing how far he had come from the arrogant instructor at the civilian range. Fine, she said. But if you're here to observe, you observe silently. Understood, Brock said, taking a position well back from the active training area. Riley returned her attention to the Marines. Final exercise for the day, she announced. I'm going to demonstrate something. Not because I'm showing off, but because I need you to understand what is possible when you fully integrate mental discipline with physical skill. She walked to a shooting position and had the range officer set up a scenario that made several Marines exchange doubtful glances. 3 targets, varying distances from 600 to 900 yards. High wind conditions. Targets would be exposed for only 5 seconds each at random intervals. This is what full integration looks like, Riley said. Watch not just where I am looking, but how I am breathing, how I am positioned, how I am managing the weapon. The first target appeared at 700 yards. Riley acquired, calculated, and fired in less than 3 seconds. Perfect hit. The target disappeared. Silence from the Marines. Even the wind seemed to quiet. The second target appeared at 900 yards, partially obscured by a barrier. Riley made minute adjustments and fired. The round threaded through the narrow opening and struck center mass. For seconds, Brock had moved closer, watching with the same awe the Marines displayed. The third target appeared at 600 yards, but it was moving. A slow lateral traverse that required leading the target and calculating its speed. Riley tracked smoothly and fired. The round intercepted the target perfectly. 3.5 seconds. She cleared the weapon and stood. That is your goal, she said to the Marines. Not to match what I just did. That took me years of combat experience to achieve. But to understand that the limits you perceive are often self-imposed. Your body and mind are capable of far more than you believe. How do you do it? Chen asked, his voice filled with genuine wonder. How do you calculate that fast? I do not calculate, Riley said. Not consciously. I have made these calculations so many times that my subconscious handles the math, while my conscious mind focuses on execution. It is like driving a car. When you first learn, you think about every action. Gas, brake, steering, mirrors. But eventually you just drive. The thinking becomes automatic. Gunny Wolf raised her hand. How many shots have you taken in combat? Riley felt the question like a physical weight. Confirmed? 127. Unconfirmed, probably 3 times that number. Every one of them lives I ended to protect lives I valued more. Do you regret any of them? Another Marine asked. All of them and none of them, Riley said. I regret the necessity. I regret living in a world where my skills were needed. But I do not regret the choices I made. Every trigger pull saved lives. That has to be enough. The Marines absorbed this in respectful silence. They were beginning to understand that the skills Riley taught came with a cost that went beyond physical exhaustion or mental discipline. They came with the weight of having used those skills to kill. Dismissed, Riley said. Review your performance videos tonight. Identify 3 things you did wrong and 3 things you did right. Tomorrow we will work on eliminating the wrong and reinforcing the right. As the Marines departed, Brock approached Riley carefully. That was incredible, he said. I have never seen anything like it. That was functional, Riley corrected. Incredible would be making those shots while under fire, with a teammate bleeding out next to you, knowing that missing means everyone dies. That is when skill becomes survival. Can I ask you something? Brock said. You just did. He smiled slightly at the deflection. Why did you really agree to do this? To teach these Marines? Was it for them, or was it for you? Riley considered the question honestly. Both, she admitted. They need what I know, and I needed to stop running from what I am. Teaching them is teaching myself that Ghost was not just a killer. Ghost was a protector, and maybe Riley can be too, in a different way. I misjudged you so completely, Brock said quietly. When I think about how I talked to you that morning, I am genuinely ashamed. You could not have known, Riley said. That is the point, though. I should not have assumed. I should not have needed to know your background to treat you with respect. I should have given that respect freely. You learned, Riley said. That is what matters. Growth is not avoiding mistakes. It is learning from them. Will you let me learn from you? Brock asked. Officially, not as someone observing, but as someone training. I want to be better. I want to actually know what I am teaching instead of just repeating what I was taught. Riley looked at him, seeing the genuine humility, the real desire to improve. The man who had condescended to her at the range was gone, replaced by someone willing to admit his limitations. If Captain Reardon approves it, Riley said, I will train you. But understand, I will push you as hard as I push them. Maybe harder, because you have more bad habits to unlearn. I understand, Brock said, and I welcome it. As he walked away, Riley stood alone on the range, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. For the first time in 18 months, she felt something that approximated peace. Not the absence of pain, not the forgetting of Daniel or the missions or the cost, but the acceptance that she could carry those things and still move forward. The final week of the training program arrived with unexpected attention. Word had spread through the Marine Corps about the legendary Ghost teaching at Camp Pendleton. Officers from other bases had requested permission to observe. Military journalists wanted to document the program. Even a documentary crew had approached Captain Reardon about filming. Riley had refused all media requests. This was not about recognition or glory. This was about preparing warriors to survive. But she could not control the growing legend, the whispered stories about the female SEAL sniper who could make impossible shots look routine. On the second to last day of training, Captain Reardon approached Riley with a request. We have a VIP visitor tomorrow, he said. Vice Admiral Patricia Morrison, Naval Special Warfare Command. She wants to meet you. Riley felt her stomach tighten. Vice Admiral Morrison was a legend herself, one of the highest-ranking women in naval history. She had been a vocal advocate for women in special operations and had personally pushed for the integration policies that allowed Riley to even attempt SEAL training. Why? Riley asked. She's been following your work here. She thinks what you are doing is important, and she wants to discuss something with you. The next morning, Riley stood at attention as Vice Admiral Morrison arrived, her uniform immaculate, her bearing radiating authority earned through decades of service. She was in her late 50s, with silver hair and eyes that had seen everything the Navy could throw at them. At ease, the Admiral said. Riley Castellanos. Ghost, I have wanted to meet you for a long time. Ma'am, Riley said, uncertain how to respond. Walk with me, the Admiral said, and it was not a request. They walked along the perimeter of the range, away from the Marines who were preparing for the day's final exercises. The Admiral was quiet for a long moment before speaking. I read the classified report on Kandahar, she said finally. The shot you made, the lives you saved, and the loss you suffered. I am sorry about Petty Officer Chen. He was an exceptional operator. Riley felt the familiar tightness in her chest. Thank you, ma'am. I also read your discharge paperwork. Medical retirement for PTSD. Honorable service. Navy Cross recipient. And then you disappeared for 18 months. No contact with the teams. No participation in veteran programs. Just gone. I needed space, Riley said carefully, to figure out who I was without the uniform. And did you figure it out? Riley looked across the range where her Marines were setting up. I'm starting to, she said. Good, the Admiral said, because I have an offer for you. Naval Special Warfare Command is establishing a new training program specifically for women entering special operations. We need someone to lead it, someone who has done what these women aspire to do, someone who understands both the physical demands and the cultural challenges. You're the only person qualified. Riley stopped walking. Ma'am, with respect, I am retired. I am done with active duty. This would not be active duty, the Admiral clarified. This would be a civilian contractor position, similar to what you're doing here. But it would be permanent. It would be your program to design and implement. You would have full authority over curriculum, training standards, everything. Riley felt the weight of the offer. This was not just teaching a 6-week course. This was shaping the future of women in special operations. This was institutional change at the highest level. Why me? Riley asked. There are other female operators, some still active duty. Because you earned your place when it was hardest, the Admiral said bluntly. You did not have the benefit of official integration policies. You had to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. You faced harassment and skepticism and outright hostility, and you still became one of the deadliest snipers in SEAL history. That experience, that resilience, is what these women need to learn. I'm not sure I am the right person, Riley said. I have baggage, trauma. I'm still working through my own issues. Show me a combat veteran without baggage, and I will show you someone who never actually saw combat, the Admiral said. Your trauma does not disqualify you. It makes you real. It makes you someone these women can trust to tell them the truth about what this life costs. Riley was quiet, feeling the pull of purpose warring with her fear of commitment, of stepping back into the world she had spent 18 months trying to escape. Think about it, the Admiral said. I need an answer in 2 weeks. But consider this. Right now, there are young women enlisting who want to serve in special operations. They deserve to be trained by someone who understands what they will face. Someone who will prepare them not just for the physical challenges, but for the cultural battles they will fight. You could be that person. Before Riley could respond, an alarm sounded across the base. Not a drill, an actual emergency. Captain Reardon appeared at a run, his face grim. We have a situation, he said. Active shooter reported at the base exchange. Multiple casualties. Security forces are responding, but the shooter is barricaded with hostages. Riley felt the shift happen instantly. The civilian contractor disappeared. Ghost emerged. Where? She demanded. Northeast section, near the food court, the captain said. Reports of at least 3 hostages. Shooter is armed with a rifle and has military training based on his tactics. Vice Admiral Morrison's expression hardened. Captain, mobilize your security response team. I want a perimeter established and all civilians evacuated from adjacent buildings. Ma'am, Riley said, her voice calm and focused. I can help. The Admiral looked at her, seeing the transformation, recognizing the operator beneath the civilian clothes. You're not active duty. You're not authorized for tactical operations. With respect, ma'am, authorization is a luxury people do not have when they are being held hostage. I have the skills. I have the experience. And I am here now. The Admiral made a decision in the space of a heartbeat. Captain Reardon, equip Ms. Castellanos with whatever she needs. She is authorized to provide tactical support to your security forces under my direct command. Clear? Crystal, ma'am, the captain said. Riley was moving before he finished speaking. She sprinted to the armory, her mind already running scenarios, calculating angles, assessing options. The armorer, recognizing her from 3 weeks of training, did not question when she requested her custom 13 Malawian Quachas rifle, the one she had brought from home, the one that knew her better than any person ever had. She checked the weapon with practiced efficiency, loaded it, and grabbed additional magazines. Gunny Wolf appeared, along with Chun and 2 other Marines for the training program. "We're coming with you," Wolf said. "This is not training," Riley said sharply. "This is real. People die in real situations." "Which is exactly why you need backup," Wolf insisted. "You taught us to operate under pressure. Let's prove we learned." Riley looked at their faces, seeing determination and fear in equal measure. She made a tactical decision. "Wolf, you are with me. Spotter position. The rest of you establish perimeter security and civilian evacuation routes. No heroics. No unnecessary risks. Clear? Clear, they responded in unison. Riley and Wolf sprinted toward the base exchange, the rifle across Riley's back, her mind sharp and focused in a way it had not been since Kandahar. This was what she had trained for. This was what Ghost had been built to do. As they approached the perimeter established by base security, Riley could see the tactical situation. The shooter had positioned himself in a corner of the food court with clear sight lines to all approaches. Smart, trained, dangerous. A security officer briefed her quickly. 3 confirmed hostages. 2 employees, 1 dependent child approximately 8 years old. Shooter is making demands, but they are incoherent. We suspect mental health crisis, possibly PTSD related. Riley felt a stab of sympathy for the shooter, recognizing the signs of someone broken by service, someone whose mind had fractured under the weight of what they had seen and done. But sympathy could not override necessity. Those hostages needed to leave alive. I need a position with clear line of sight, Riley said. Somewhere elevated if possible. The security officer pointed to a maintenance building with roof access. Best we have. About 200 yards from the target location. Riley and Wolf moved quickly, gaining access to the roof and setting up a shooting position with efficient precision. Riley assembled her rifle, checked the scope, calculated distance and wind. Wolf set up beside her with a spotting scope, falling into the rhythm they had practiced during training. Target acquired, Wolf said quietly. Adult male, approximately 40 years old, military haircut, holding AR-15 style rifle. 3 hostages visible. He has the child directly in front of him. Riley looked through her scope, seeing the scene with absolute clarity. The shooter was crying, his face twisted with anguish and rage. The child was terrified, maybe 7 years old, tears streaming down her face. The 2 adult hostages were on their knees, hand behind their heads. Distance? Riley asked. 212 yards, Wolf confirmed. Wind is negligible. Clear shot available, but hostage proximity is tight. Riley could see it. The shot was possible, but difficult. The shooter was using the child as a shield, keeping her close. But there were moments, brief windows, when he gestured or shifted position, where a clean shot existed. This is Ghost, Riley said into the radio that security had provided. I have the shot, but I need negotiators to create an opening. I need him to move the child 6 inches to his left. Negative, Ghost, came the response from the incident commander. Negotiators report subject is escalating, threatening to execute hostages in 60 seconds unless demands are met. We cannot wait for perfect positioning. Riley felt time compress into crystalline focus. 60 seconds. A child's life. An impossible shot. Everything she had been running from for 18 months had led to this single moment. Wolf was breathing beside her, controlled but tense. Range 212 yards. Wind 2 knots left to right. Target partially obscured by hostage. Clearance approximately 4 inches. Riley settled into the rifle, feeling it become part of her body. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat dropped to 40 beats per minute. The world narrowed to the scope, the target, the mathematics of life and death. She could hear Daniel's voice in her memory, calm and steady. You have made harder shots than this, Ghost. Trust your training. Trust yourself. The shooter was shouting now, his voice carrying across the distance. 45 seconds. Riley watched him through the scope, seeing not just a target, but a human being in crisis. A veteran whose mind had broken. Someone who had served and sacrificed and come home shattered. Someone like her. But unlike her, he had chosen to hurt innocents. And that choice, regardless of the pain that drove it, could not be allowed to continue. 30 seconds, the incident commander said over the radio. Ghost, if you have a shot, take it. Authorization is given. Riley exhaled slowly, entering the space between heartbeats where time stopped and skill became instinct. The shooter moved, a slight shift as he wiped his eyes with his free hand. The child moved with him, but the angle changed by fractions of an inch. There, the opening. For 0.2 inches of clearance. Enough for a shot if it was perfect, if the calculations were exact, if her hand was steady and her mind was clear and the universe aligned for one perfect moment. Shot available, Wolf confirmed, her voice barely a whisper. Clearance minimal. High risk. Riley thought of Kandahar, of the impossible choice, of Daniel telling her to take the shot, and the child who lived because she did and the man who died because she was too slow getting out. She thought of the Admiral's words. You earned your place when it was hardest. She thought of her Marines, watching from the perimeter, trusting that their instructor could do what she had taught them to aspire to. She thought of Vanessa preparing to enlist, needing to believe that women could be strong enough, skilled enough, brave enough. And she thought of Daniel, who had died believing in her, who had never doubted her ability to make the impossible shot. Taking the shot, Riley said quietly. Her finger pressed the trigger with the gentleness of a prayer. The rifle fired. The round traveled 212 yards in less time than a heartbeat. It passed through the narrow gap between the child's head and the shooter's skull with millimeters to spare. The shooter dropped instantly, the round entering just above his right eye. Death instantaneous and painless. The child screamed, but she was unharmed. The hostages scattered. Security forces rushed in. Clean hit, Wolf breathed, her voice filled with awe. Target down. Hostages safe. Riley did not move for a long moment. She stayed in position, scope still on target, confirming what she already knew. The shot had been perfect. The child was alive. The hostages were being evacuated. The threat was eliminated. But unlike Kandahar, everyone on her team was coming home. She cleared the weapon and stood, her legs slightly unsteady. Wolf was staring at her with something approaching reverence. That was impossible, Wolf said. The clearance was less than 5 inches. In real combat conditions, under time pressure, that was absolutely impossible. Possible is just a limit we impose on ourselves, Riley said, echoing what she had told her Marines. When the alternative is unacceptable, impossible becomes mandatory. They descended from the roof to find Vice Admiral Morrison waiting, her expression unreadable. Captain Reardon was beside her, along with base security and medical personnel who were already treating the hostages for shock. The child was crying in her mother's arms, physically unharmed but traumatized. Riley watched them, feeling the weight of what had almost happened. What would have happened if she had missed by even an inch? Ms. Castellanos, the Admiral said formally. That was extraordinary marksmanship. You saved 3 lives today. Just doing what needed to be done, ma'am, Riley said. The Admiral stepped closer, her voice dropping to a tone only Riley could hear. That shot was Kandahar-level difficulty. Maybe harder, and you made it without a spotter you had worked with for years. You made it under time pressure with a child's life at stake. Do you understand what that means? It means I got lucky, Riley said. It means you were exactly who I thought you were, the Admiral said. Someone who rises to impossible challenges. Someone who saves lives when no one else can. Someone who belongs in service, even if that service looks different than it used to. Riley looked at the hostages being led to safety, at Gunny Wolf, who was explaining the shot to the other Marines with barely contained excitement, at the base security forces who were treating the shooter's body with respect despite what he had done. I will take the job, Riley said quietly, training the next generation of women in special operations. I will do it. The Admiral's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Good. When can you start? After I finish this program, Riley said. I made a commitment to these Marines. I see it through. Exactly what I expected you to say, the Admiral replied. Welcome back to service, Riley Castellanos. The Navy is better for having you, in whatever capacity you choose to serve. As the Admiral walked away to coordinate with base security, Brock appeared, having sprinted across the base when he heard about the situation. He stopped short when he saw Riley, still holding her rifle, the reality of what had just happened written across her face. I heard the shot over the radio, he said. They said it was impossible. They said no one could make it. I had a good teacher once, Riley said with the faintest hint of a smile. He taught me about grip and stance and trigger control. Brock laughed, the sound breaking the tension. I'm never going to live that down, am I? Not even a little bit. Marcus arrived moments later, followed by Vanessa, who had somehow talked her way onto the base, claiming she was Riley's family. They stood together, this unlikely group brought together by a Saturday morning at a shooting range, bound now by something deeper than circumstance. You did it again, Marcus said quietly. You save people. That is who you are, Riley. That is who you have always been. Riley looked at her hands, steady now, no longer shaking the way they had for 18 months. She thought about Daniel, about all the lives saved and lost, about the weight she had carried alone. Maybe, she said, or maybe I'm just someone learning to live with being Ghost and Riley at the same time, learning that I do not have to choose, that I can honor what I was by choosing what I become. What you become as a teacher, Vanessa said firmly. My teacher. You promised you would help me prepare for enlisting. I'm holding you to that. I did promise, Riley agreed. And I keep my promises. Gunny Wolf approached, her face serious. Ma'am, the Marines want to know if you are okay. They saw what happened. They understand what you just did. Tell them I am fine, Riley said. And tell them that tomorrow we finish the program the right way. No distractions. No shortcuts. They came here to learn, and I came here to teach. Everything else is just noise. Wolf saluted, the gesture informal but heartfelt. Yes, ma'am. As the sun began to set over Camp Pendleton, Riley stood with her rifle, surrounded by people who had seen her at her lowest and her highest, who had witnessed Ghost and Riley and understood they were not separate people but facets of the same complex whole. Captain Reardon approached with final details about the incident report, the official documentation that would classify the shot and keep Riley's involvement as quiet as possible. She signed the paperwork without reading it, trusting the system to handle the bureaucracy. One more day of training, the captain said. Then graduation. Admiral Morrison plans to attend. She wants to personally present certificates to your Marines. They earned them, Riley said. Every single one of them proved they can handle the pressure. They are ready. Because you made them ready, the captain said. Because you gave them what no classroom instructor could. The wisdom of someone who has lived it. As everyone dispersed to their various duties, Riley found herself alone again. The rifle across her lap, the California sky turning orange and purple above her. She thought about the journey from that Saturday morning when she had let Brock teach her things she already knew to this moment where she had accepted her place as both warrior and teacher. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. She opened it. This is Detective Okafor. Heard about what happened today. Heard you made an impossible shot and saved lives. Not surprised. Just wanted to say thank you for being who you are. The world needs more people like you. Riley stared at the message, feeling something warm and unfamiliar in her chest. Not pride exactly. Not satisfaction. But acceptance. The understanding that she had spent 18 months trying to erase Ghost when the answer was integration, not elimination. She stood, gathering her equipment, preparing for tomorrow's final day of training. As she walked toward the armory, she whispered words meant for Daniel, wherever he was. I made the shot. The child lived. Everyone came home. I think I'm going to be okay now. I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me all along. That being Ghost was not about killing. It was about protecting, and I can still protect, even without pulling triggers. Thank you for believing in me, even when I could not believe in myself. The wind carried her words away into the gathering darkness, and Riley Castellanos walked forward into whatever came next, no longer running from her past, but carrying it with purpose toward a future where Ghost and Riley could finally coexist in peace. Graduation day arrived with perfect California weather, the sky clear and blue, the temperature mild. Riley stood at the edge of the parade ground, watching her Marines prepare for the ceremony. They moved with confidence now, with the precision and discipline of operators who had been pushed to their limits and discovered they were capable of more than they imagined. Gunny Wolf approached in dress uniform, her bearing sharp and professional. Marines are ready, ma'am. Captain Reardon asked if you wanted to say anything before the formal ceremony. Riley had not prepared a speech. She had spent 6 weeks showing them rather than telling them, demonstrating through action what words could never fully convey. But looking at these warriors she had helped shape, she knew they deserved more than silence. The 12 Marines assembled before her, their faces reflecting everything they had learned, everything they had become. Staff Sergeant Shun, Gunny Wolf, 10 others whose names and stories Riley now carried with her. Additions to the roster of people whose lives had intersected with hers and left both changed. 6 weeks ago, Riley began. You came here thinking you were already good at your jobs. You had qualifications. You had training. You had confidence. And you were right to have those things. But I pushed you to understand that good is not good enough when lives depend on you. That excellence is the minimum standard when a margin for error is measured in fractions of inches and heartbeats. She paused, seeing them absorb her words. You have proven you can handle pressure. You can make impossible shots. You can operate under conditions that would break lesser warriors. But the most important thing you learned here has nothing to do with marksmanship. What was it? Shun asked, his voice respectful. That the weapon is not the rifle, Riley said. It is you, your mind, your discipline, your ability to stay human while doing inhuman things. Your capacity to make terrible choices and still sleep at night, knowing you made the right one. That is what separates operators from shooters. And all of you are operators now. Gunny Wolf stepped forward. Ma'am, the Marines have something for you. We took a vote and agreed unanimously. She produced a framed photograph. It showed Riley on the range, rifle shouldered, teaching form to one of the Marines. But surrounding the image were 12 signatures, each Marine having signed their name along with a personal message. Thank you for showing us what excellence looks like. Thank you for your sacrifice. Thank you for making us better. Thank you for being Ghost so we could learn to be ghosts ourselves. Riley felt emotion rise in her throat, threatening to break her composure. She accepted the frame, running her fingers over the signatures. Thank you, she said quietly. This means more than you know. The formal ceremony began 30 minutes later. Vice Admiral Morrison arrived in full dress uniform, accompanied by Captain Reardon and several other senior officers. Families filled the stands, proud parents and spouses who had supported these Marines through 6 weeks of the most intensive training of their careers. Brock sat in the front row, having earned his place through 4 weeks of remedial training where Riley had systematically dismantled and rebuilt his understanding of marksmanship. Beside him sat Marcus, Vanessa, and Kowalski, the unlikely family that had formed from a Saturday morning that felt like a lifetime ago. Vice Admiral Morrison took the podium, her voice carrying authority earned through decades of service. Today we recognize 12 Marines who have completed the most advanced marksmanship training the Corps offers. They have been taught by the best. They have been pushed beyond what they believed possible. They have earned their place among the elite. She called each Marine forward individually, presenting certificates and commendations. When Gunny Wolf received hers, the Admiral added, "This Marine demonstrated exceptional aptitude and leadership. She has been selected for advanced training at the Scout Sniper School, with a recommendation from her instructor that she will exceed all standards." Wolf's face showed controlled pride, but her eyes found Riley's, and the gratitude there was unmistakable. After the formal presentations, the Admiral's tone shifted. This program exists because one woman believed it should. Because former Petty Officer First Class Riley Castellanos agreed to share knowledge earned through sacrifice most of us cannot comprehend. Ghost is a legend in special operations circles. But the woman behind that call sign is something more. She is proof that excellence transcends gender, that skill transcends circumstance, that the measure of a warrior is not their size or strength, but their dedication to protecting others. The Admiral gestured for Riley to join her at the podium. Riley walked forward, uncomfortable with the attention, but unable to refuse. Effective immediately, the Admiral said, "Riley Castellanos is appointed Director of the Naval Special Warfare Women's Integration Training Program. She will design and implement the curriculum that prepares the next generation of female operators. She will set the standards. She will select the instructors. She will ensure that every woman who enters special operations has the tools to succeed. This is not just a job. This is a legacy. The assembled crowd erupted in applause. Riley saw her Marines standing at attention, saluting despite being in a non-saluting environment, showing respect in the only way they knew how. She saw Vanessa crying openly, inspired by what was possible. She saw Brock and Marcus standing, their applause genuine and heartfelt. "Thank you, Admiral," Riley said into the microphone. "To the Marines I trained, you honored me by trusting my instruction. To the families who supported them, thank you for sharing your loved ones with a program that demanded everything they had. And to everyone who believed that women belong in special operations, your faith has been justified by warriors like Gunny Wolf, who prove every day that gender is irrelevant when skill and dedication are present." She paused, feeling the weight of the moment. 18 months ago, I left service broken. I thought being Ghost had cost me everything that mattered. I thought the only way forward was to forget, to hide, to pretend I had never been a warrior. I was wrong. The way forward was integration. Accepting that Ghost and Riley are not separate people, but facets of the same whole. That the skills I learned in service of war can find new purpose in service of preparation. That teaching the next generation is not running from the past, but honoring it. Her voice grew stronger. To every woman watching this who dreams of serving in special operations, know this. The path is hard. The standards are unforgiving. The cost is real. But if you have the dedication, if you have the discipline, if you are willing to push beyond what you believe possible, you belong. Not because standards were lowered for you, but because you met them, exceeded them, proved that warriors come in all forms. The applause was thunderous. Riley stepped back from the podium, feeling lighter than she had in years. The ceremony concluded with a reception where families mingled with Marines, where stories were shared and futures discussed. Vanessa found Riley first. "I signed my enlistment papers this morning," she said. "I shipped to basic in 8 weeks. And after that, I'm going to work my way into your program. I'm going to prove I belong." "You already belong," Riley said. "You belong the moment you decided to try. The rest is just paperwork and sweat." "Will you be there?" Vanessa asked. "When I go through the program." "I will be there," Riley promised. "Watching, evaluating, pushing you harder than anyone else because I know what you can become." Brock approached with Marcus, both men looking slightly uncomfortable in the formal setting. "So, Director Castellanos," Brock said with a grin. "Does this mean I call you ma'am now?" "It means you keep learning," Riley said, "because I'm going to need instructors for this program. Instructors who understand that respect is earned, not demanded. Instructors who can teach without ego." "Interested?" "Absolutely," Brock said without hesitation. "I would be honored." Kowalski was the last to approach, the old Vietnam veteran moving slowly but steadily. "You found your peace," he observed. "Different than you expected, but you found it." "Thanks to you," Riley said. "You let me hide when I needed to hide, and you were there when I was ready to stop hiding." "That is what warriors do for each other," Kowalski said. "We carry each other until we can walk on our own again." As the reception wound down and people began to depart, Riley stood alone on the parade ground, watching the sun set over Camp Pendleton. She thought about the journey from that Saturday morning to this moment, about Brock's condescension and the robbery in Kandahar and impossible shots, and finding purpose in teaching rather than killing. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, but she recognized the area code. It was from Coronado, where SEAL Team operations were based. The message was simple. From the teammates of Petty Officer Daniel Chun. "We heard what you were doing. We heard you were teaching again. We heard you made peace with Kandahar. Daniel would be proud. We are proud. Huya Ghost." Riley stood there as darkness fell, tears streaming down her face, finally allowing herself to grieve and celebrate simultaneously. Daniel was gone. That pain would never fully heal. But his memory could live on through every operator she trained, every life saved by skills she taught, every woman who proved that excellence knew no gender. She pulled out her own phone and typed a response. "Thank you. I carry him with me every day, every shot I teach, every student I graduate, every impossible standard I refuse to lower. He lives on through the warriors we create together. Hoya." If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, your favorite character, or if you have had a similar situation happen to you before. Share your thoughts about someone you know who showed hidden strength or overcame being underestimated. Riley Castellanos walked off the parade ground as the stars emerged overhead. She was Ghost, legendary sniper with an impossible record. She was Riley, woman learning to live with what she had done and who she had been. She was a teacher, a mentor, a warrior finding new battles to fight. But most importantly, she was no longer hiding, no longer running, no longer trying to be someone she was not. She was exactly who she needed to be. And that, finally, was enough. The rifle case was in her car, the custom 13 Malawian Quatches secured and ready for tomorrow's training session. Because there would always be another training session. Another student who needed what she knew. Another warrior who deserved the best instruction available. Ghost had come home, not to war, but to purpose. And in that purpose, Riley Castellanos had finally found peace.